Hello, fellow Blender 3D users, and welcome to BCubed, Beginning Blender Basics, brought to you by Meshology.com. Let's get started with Module 1, the Blender Interface. In this module, we'll quickly review the Outline Editor, located in the top right, the Tool menu bar, located over on the left-hand side, and the Properties menu, located on the right-hand side, right here. And we'll also go over how to center the 3D cursor using Shift-C. So let's get started with the Outline Editor. On the top here of the parent of the whole thing is the scene, and this is actually this whole scene view right here, the viewport. Right here on the top we have a scene. It says Scene 2, and this is related because what you can do is hit the plus and add new scenes. So for example, if I add another scene, I just do that, and this is called scene.001. You can rename it to whatever you want to. I'm going to go back to my other scene because technically we really don't need to do that. I just wanted to show you that that's there, but I don't use it too often for modeling. So if you're going to do animation or something, you want to do multiple scenes, flip back and forth between them, that might be of use to you. But right now we're just going to leave that as one default scene here. We're going to go over render layers later. World, we're going to go over later. Right now we're going to get to these items. We have the camera right here, which actually does the rendering. You can hit press F12, and you'll see the render here in the render view window. I hit escape to get out of that. There's the cube, which is in the foreground here. You have cube.1 and cube.2. And what this is basically is iterations of the cube. So whether you copy them by using Shift-D to duplicate. So I'm going to delete this one. So for example, I wanted to make a duplicate of this. I'll hit Shift-D. Then I'll hit left click again. And then I'll use the GUI right here, controller, the widget, I think it's called, to bring it over here. Okay. So, for example, now I'm going to do like a sample scene here where I'm going to compose a scene where I have a model house. I'm going to model a car over here on the right hand side. That's cube 2, and then cube 1 is going to be my person that lives in the house and drives the car. So to make seeing things easier on you, it really helps to name your objects before you start modeling. So I'm going to call this one home or house. Cube 1 I'm going to call it's a person, so I'm going to call him Bob, for example. And then cube 2 is going to be a car eventually. Okay, so we have all our objects named, and this is super important, like I said, because in a scene things can get very confused very quickly. They get very complicated, and naming your objects really helps you to compose things and keep track of what's going on. You could also name the lamp if you want to. You can call it sun if you want. It's just a light source for the render. And this is a whole topic unto itself, which we'll cover in future modules. Okay, and then there's the camera, of course. And if you hit, like I said, if you hit F12, you can see the render. I'm going to go over restricting renders over here in this next section. So over here we have toggle buttons. We have a restrict viewport visibility button, a restrict viewport selection button, and a restrict rendering button. So I'm going to use house, the house object cube is my example. So for restrict viewport visibility, what that does basically is makes your object invisible. So it turns it off, and this is good. For example, say I want to work just on the person. So I might turn off the house and the car, and I could zoom in and work on the person here, and make Bob, make him look all like a person, and really get in there and do the detail work without being distracted by the rest of the scene. When I'm done, I can come back out and bring the stuff together and re-render it again. So that's a really good use of that, is to focus on some things and turn things off. The second button I want to talk about is the restrict viewport selection toggle button. So what this does is this allows you to, it prevents you from clicking accidentally on objects. So for example, I'm going to use the house again, where I'm going to turn it off. So now what this allows me to do is, and I'll probably turn off Bob, so I want to work on the car now. So what this allows me to do is select everything. It won't allow me to select Bob or the house, but I still can select the car, still can select the light. So that's why I can't accidentally actually move the house or move Bob or do any kind of modifications to them. So that's really useful if you try to keep things locked in place. So we'll turn them back on again, and then you can reselect them like that. The third toggle button I want to go over is the render toggle button. What this allows you to do, I'm going to use house as an example. You can come over here and click on this. So what this does, if I hit the F12 button now, is it hides the object from the render, which is sort of cool if you want to just see particular objects in the scene without seeing other objects for whatever reason, lighting or shadows or whatever. So you could do that. If you want to see it again, you just turn it on and then you hit F12 and it comes back again. Okay, so that's basically the basics of the outline editor. The second section I want to talk about is the tool menu bar. The two ones I look at mostly are the tools. I'm not going to go over these, and the reason why is that the translate, rotate, and scale are best done as the shortcut keys instead of using these buttons. And then here's the reason why. So for example, I want to move house. If I hit translate to move it, my cursor's way out here and the cube's right there. That makes absolutely no sense at all. It's just not very good control setup. So what I would do instead is use the translate shortcut key, which is G. So I go over here, put my cursor here, then hit G. Now I've got much better control where I move this thing because it's the cursor's right on top of it. So, the one thing I would use here is a smooth and flat. So when you get to subdivision surfaces or things that have you want to have curved or rounded, putting it to smooth really helps to smooth things out, the geometries out, to give you a nice smooth curve. It's not going to help much with 3D printing, but it will help if you're trying to render or do animation. It will smooth out the object, the model. The other tab I want to talk about is the primitive, and what this does is this is where you bring in all your primitives. So for example, the 3D cursor is where your primitive comes in. So if I wanted to, example, place the 3D cursor in a location, so I want to put a ball right above this cube right here. I know that its X and Y is 0 and 0, right? Because if I click on the object, you can see the location 0, 0. So here's a really cool thing, is you can actually go to the 3D cursor over here in the properties menu and place it precisely. So I want to place this at 5. So I want this to be exactly right above the cube. I'm going to put a sphere. Okay, so now I have a sphere that's 5 Blender units up, centered over the cube. Maybe it's going to be a disco ball or an alien, whatever, right, in the scene. So that's a really cool thing there. So using the 3D cursor in conjunction with placement of the primitives allows you precise control of the placement. Coming back to this primitive menu, we have plane, cube, circle, sphere. We have cylinder, all kinds of primitives to start out for your modeling endeavors. Torus, which is like a donut. We have the grid, and we have monkey. I don't know. Her name's Suzanne. She's very popular. Over here we have curves. We have Bezier, circle curve, and then we have NURB curve. And down here we have lamps to add your different types of lamps. We'll go over it later module. And then down here we have text. We can have 3D text, and there's armature for animation, lattice for deformations, and then empty and camera and speaker. So that's pretty much it for the tool menu bar. Over here on the right hand side, one last thing about the tool menu bar is it's context driven. So for example, if I was to go into edit mode, you'll see now that this changes, especially in tools, right? So if I was to go back to object mode, then go to edit mode, you'll see that there's a bunch of new tools in here. So this is a contextual menu depending upon what mode you're in. So that's something just to note. And we'll go over that more in edit and object mode in module 6. The next part we're going to go over is the properties menu over here on the right hand side. We have transform. I sort of went over this, so basically this tells you where your object is, location, the rotation, the scale, and the dimensions. And you can easily change your dimensions by just coming over here and clicking in here and adding a new number or value to your dimensions. So if I want to make this 4 Blender units long now to make a long house, just put 4 in the Y, and there you go. So you can modify real quickly doing this. I'm going to make it a little taller. At 3, so that's a little bit taller, so it's a sort of a tall house, and maybe I want to make it a little wider. So now I've got this really big square house. So yeah, that's how you would do that. It just makes it a very precise way to enter values in there without having to stretch things out. It depends on what you're doing. If you want precise modeling, entering values is really the way to go. But if you're trying to do some just modeling for organic purposes, then maybe this wouldn't be as useful. We also have grease pencil. You can actually draw on top of the scene, which is sort of cool. Go over that in a later module. View allows you to, especially this clips part right here, allows you to control the viewing area of the camera. So it actually will clip the view at the start and at the end. So if you bring the end in here, on your grid, anything that placed beyond that distance from the camera, which is the end point, will actually not show up in the render, or actually I think inside the viewport. So that's super important. You want to keep that beyond the grid if you want to see everything. Otherwise, you can have problems. This is a 3D cursor location. We already talked about that. There's shading here for different types of shading. The background images is cool because you can load an image onto the background, and you can modify its position, you can modify its size, and then you can actually use that as a reference to do your basic mesh shape and form to get an accurate representation from the image on your mesh. It's pretty cool. I'll go over that in another module too at a later time. Those are basically the main parts of the property menu I'm going to cover. The last thing I want to cover is the Shift-C button. So, for example, say you're like something happened, you came over here and you have no idea what happened to your scene. It just disappeared basically. And you're like, what happened? I can't find it. One way to get back to it is to hit Shift-C. And what that will do is bring you back to your origin. It actually centers the 3D cursor on the origin and brings everything back to there. So you can now see all your objects are right here. So this is really useful if you get totally lost. You can also hit home. Upside down there. What that does is center all your objects on the view screen too. But I like using Shift-C better actually. So depends on your preference, but Shift-C or home will work, but I like Shift-C better. So if you get lost, Shift-C. Just remember that. Okay, that's about it for this module 1. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in module 2.